Well, tonight, a woman's family is grieving following a deadly domestic violence situation. Richland deputies responded to an apartment on Mallet Hill Road last night. The cause of a woman who we now know as Wynter Straw.
We're running late for dinner, but get ready with us. Well, more so like an outfit of the day. Purse, Forever 21. Bodysuit, Charlotte Russe. Skirt, Sheen. I don't have no shoes on, but some sandals. Come on, baby.
Shirt, ABP.
Billionaire Boys.
Billionaire Boys. Shorts. My baby. Socks. ABP. Baby. Horsey. Sorry, that's Foot Locker.
Columbia, South Carolina. March 26, 2023. It's just past sundown when neighbors in a quiet apartment community hear the sound no one ever wants to hear, screaming, followed by rapid gunfire. A 25-year-old woman collapses outside her home, her life violently stolen in the very place she should have felt safe. That woman was Wynter Straw, a daughter, a mother, a corrections officer, and a bright, ambitious young woman who dedicated her life to helping others. But that night, Wynter became the victim of the very kind of crisis she had spent her career trying to prevent. The man responsible? The boyfriend she once believed was her future, Renardo S. On social media, he looked like the doting partner. Their videos together showed smiles, laughter, and love. But behind those carefully framed posts, hidden in the captions, buried in the jokes, was a darkness no one recognized until it was too late. Wynter's death wasn't just a tragedy. It wasn't just another case of domestic violence. What happened that night revealed something more chilling: how abuse can hide in plain sight, how control can masquerade as love, and how even the strongest among us can miss the warning signs. Before we dive into the tragic death of Wynter Straw, take a moment to subscribe. On this channel, we cover cases that matter, stories that don't just shock us, but teach us. Lessons about love, control, hidden abuse, and the silent battles so many are facing right now. By subscribing, you're not just following another true crime story, you're helping bring awareness that could save lives. Because what happened that night wasn't just a crime of passion, it was the chilling conclusion to a story written in digital breadcrumbs we all missed. Jokes passed off as humor. Social media posts that seemed harmless. Smiles that masked scars no one could see. And in the end, Wynter's story would become a haunting reminder that the most dangerous threats are often hidden in plain sight. Before we talk about the tragedy of Wynter Straw's final night, we need to understand who she was, because Wynter's story is not just about how she died. It's about how brilliantly she lived. Wynter Straw was only 25 years old. Yet in that short time, she had already built a reputation as someone rare, someone who didn't just survive the hardships of life, but used them as fuel to help others. She was a mental health officer for the South Carolina Department of Corrections, a role that requires patience, resilience, and empathy in the face of some of society's harshest realities. In her position, Wynter worked every day with people in crisis. Men and women battling mental illness behind prison walls, people society had often given up on. And yet Wynter never saw them as just inmates. She saw them as human beings, people who deserved dignity, compassion, and a chance to be understood. Her colleagues admired her. They say Wynter had this calm energy, this steady presence, like a light in the middle of a storm. She was the one you could count on to de-escalate a tense situation, the one who could talk someone down when no one else could reach them. And she didn't just do it because it was her job. She did it because she cared. Deeply. But Wynter was more than her career. She was a daughter, a mother, a friend, and, to many who followed her online, a source of joy. On TikTok, she shared her world with thousands of viewers, snippets of her life that showed her warmth, her humor, her energy. People saw her not just as an officer or a professional, but as a young woman full of personality, confidence, and love. She was a devoted mother. Her son was the center of her universe. Everything she did, her work, her studies, her long shifts, was ultimately for him. To build a future where he could grow up safe, proud, and inspired by her example. Those who knew her best say she balanced it all, the demands of her job, her family responsibilities, her ambitions, with a grace that seemed superhuman. Because Wynter wasn't just living day to day. She was dreaming forward. She had aspirations of becoming a lawyer, of taking her passion for justice beyond corrections, into the courtroom, where she believed she could change lives and shape policy. She talked often about reform, about creating a system that treated mental health with seriousness and care, not just punishment. She wanted to mentor others, to show young people that they had options, that their past didn't have to define their future. Have you ever known someone who lit up every room they walked into? Someone who seemed untouchable, because of their strength, their energy, their ability to make everyone feel seen? That was Wynter. She wasn't just a friend to those around her, she was hope. She was the kind of person people believed in. And maybe, that's what makes her story so painful. Because even someone like Wynter, strong, accomplished, surrounded by people who loved her, could find herself caught in a relationship where danger was hiding just out of sight. Even someone trained to recognize crisis in others, couldn't see it when it was her own. Wynter's life was filled with love, ambition, and promise. But behind the carefully curated moments of happiness she shared with the world, a different story was unfolding. A story of jealousy, control, and violence disguised as devotion. A story no one recognized until it was too late. And to understand how the darkness crept in, we need to look at the relationship that seemed perfect on the surface, but was slowly becoming a cage. To the outside world, Wynter Straw and Renardo Johnson looked like the perfect match. Their social media presence painted the picture of a couple completely in sync, smiling at the camera, dancing in the living room, sharing inside jokes with the world. Their TikToks captured playful banter, silly challenges, romantic gestures. They were the kind of couple strangers would scroll past and think, wow, that's love. On the surface, there was no sign of trouble. Wynter looked happy. Renardo looked devoted. Together, they projected an image of stability, romance, and partnership. To her followers, her friends, even her family, it seemed like Wynter had found someone who truly adored her. But social media has a way of showing us what we want to see, not what's real. And if you looked closely, really closely, cracks began to show. Those who study domestic violence have a term for this: digital breadcrumbing. It's when subtle signs of abuse, control, or obsession leave a trail across online content, disguised as humor, masked as playfulness, hidden in captions and body language. And that's exactly what Wynter and Renardo's videos began to reveal. One video, posted just weeks before her death, showed Wynter laughing about going through Renardo's phone, saying it was just boredom. But under the surface, that was a glimpse into a relationship already strained by jealousy and mistrust. Another video, uploaded on March 3rd, included a joke about stabbing him if he ever crossed a line. It was meant as humor. Followers laughed. They scrolled. They moved on. But looking back now, that video wasn't funny. It was chilling. Because abuse doesn't always begin with bruises or shouting. Sometimes it begins with jokes. With playful threats. With comments you shrug off in the moment. And by the time anyone realizes what they really meant, it's already too late. Think about it. How many times have you seen a couple post something online that felt a little off? A caption that sounded defensive. A joke that felt too sharp. Did you notice it? Did you scroll past? Did you assume everything was fine, because the smiles looked real? For Wynter, social media became both a highlight reel and a hiding place. A place where she could showcase the best parts of her relationship, while the darker moments slipped through disguised as laughter. To her audience, she was still radiant, strong, thriving. But those digital breadcrumbs told a different story. A story of control, jealousy, and violence that was no longer just a possibility, it was escalating. And this is the hardest truth of all, even Wynter herself may not have recognized it. She may have believed that what she was experiencing was normal. That every couple bickered. That jokes were just jokes. That the smiles outweighed the red flags. But in reality, every caption, every joke, every subtle shift was a warning sign. Have you ever been in a relationship that looked picture perfect to everyone else, but inside, it was different? Maybe you've seen friends post pictures of happiness, while behind the scenes, they were hurting. That's the dangerous illusion of social media. And that's the illusion Wynter's loved ones, and all of us, believed until the very end. Because soon, the playful captions would stop feeling like jokes. The smiles would start to crack. And the devotion that seemed so romantic, would reveal itself as something far more sinister. On social media, Wynter and Renardo still looked like lovebirds. But behind the filters, behind the captions and the dancing videos, things were changing. Slowly, almost invisibly at first. The attention that once looked like devotion, was starting to feel like surveillance. The care that once felt protective, was beginning to look like control. This is how abusive relationships evolve. It rarely starts with violence. It starts with little shifts. A jealous remark brushed off as flattery. Questions about where you are and who you're with, disguised as concern. Small criticisms framed as jokes. And before long, what felt like passion becomes possession. Friends noticed Wynter joking about going through Renardo's phone. She framed it as boredom, curiosity, a playful habit. But anyone who's been in that situation knows, when you're snooping through someone's phone, trust is already broken. Whether you're the one looking, or the one being checked, suspicion is there. And suspicion, left unchecked, becomes obsession. And it wasn't just Wynter. Renardo, too, had begun showing the classic signs of control. He wanted to know where she was, who she was with, what she was doing. At first, it might have sounded like love. I just want to make sure you're safe. But in reality, it was something else. A demand for ownership over her time, her space, her independence. Some believe Renardo had even kept a key to Wynter's apartment without her consent. Think about that. Your home is supposed to be your sanctuary, the one place no one can invade without your permission. But if someone has access you never gave them, it's not just about privacy. It's about power. It's about sending the message, you belong to me. Your space is my space. Your life is mine. Her family began to notice changes too. The Wynter who once called her mom and friends regularly, now reached out less often. She seemed more stressed. When people asked about Renardo, her answers became shorter, more defensive. This is what abusers count on: isolation. They quietly wedge themselves between the victim and their support system. They create conflict, sow doubt, make the victim question whether loved ones really care. And before long, the victim is standing alone, with only the abuser for validation. Control doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. It whispers in constant texts asking where you are, in unannounced visits to your job, in subtle comments that make you second-guess your own judgment. It's death by 1,000 cuts, not physical at first, but emotional, psychological. And by the time you realize you're bleeding, it feels too late to stop. Let's pause here. Wynter wasn't naive. She wasn't fragile. She was a strong woman, educated, respected, loved. But abuse doesn't target weakness. It targets strength. It twists love into a weapon. It turns independence into isolation. And it convinces even the strongest souls that what they're enduring is normal, that it's just part of love. By late February and early March, the escalation was clear. The jokes weren't just jokes. The control wasn't just concern. The love wasn't love anymore, it was obsession. And as Wynter tried to hold on to her career, her child, her dreams, Renardo tightened his grip. He wasn't just her partner anymore. He acted like he owned her. Have you ever been in a relationship where something felt off, but you brushed it aside? Maybe you thought you were overreacting. Maybe you told yourself, every couple fights. Every couple jokes like that. That's how these stories go. By the time anyone admits what's happening, the danger is already at the door. Wynter's relationship was no longer safe. The signs were there. The control, the jealousy, the isolation, and soon, the rage. Because the most dangerous moment in any abusive relationship is not when it begins. It's when the victim decides to leave. March 26, 2023. To most people in Colombia, it was just another Sunday evening. Families were winding down, kids getting ready for school the next day, neighbors enjoying the cool air before bed. But inside one apartment complex, a storm was brewing. And for Wynter Straw, this night would be her last. Just before midnight, the quiet of the complex was shattered. Neighbors reported hearing raised voices outside, Wynter and Renardo arguing. What began as words quickly escalated into something far more violent. In the still night air, their fight echoed across the parking lot. Multiple gunshots rang out. Wynter collapsed just outside her apartment. The same apartment where she had laughed, dreamed, and shared her life on social media, now the place where her life ended. Panicked neighbors called 911. The reports were frantic: a woman shot, a man with a gun, children screaming in the background. Within minutes, the parking lot that had once been filled with quiet cars was crawling with flashing lights, sirens, and officers racing to the scene. Renardo didn't run. Instead, he retreated inside the apartment and barricaded himself. What had started as a domestic dispute had become a full-blown crisis. Law enforcement surrounded the building. Neighbors were evacuated. The once quiet community was transformed into a standoff zone. Outside, Wynter lay mortally wounded. Emergency responders tried desperately to save her. She was rushed to the hospital, but her injuries were too severe. At just 25 years old, Wynter Straw was pronounced dead. In a cruel twist of fate, a woman who had dedicated her life to helping others through their darkest moments couldn't escape her own. Even with training in crisis intervention, even with a reputation for strength and empathy, Wynter became another victim of intimate partner violence. But the night was far from over. With Wynter gone, law enforcement turned their focus to Renardo. Negotiators called out to him for hours. Crisis teams pleaded with him to surrender peacefully. The standoff dragged deep into the early morning, with the whole neighborhood locked down in fear. And then, sometime in the early hours, the standoff ended. Renardo Johnson, the man who had once danced with Wynter in TikToks, the man she had once trusted with her heart, turned the gun on himself. When officers breached the apartment, they found him dead from a gunshot wound. In one night, 2 lives were lost. A murder-suicide. 2 families shattered. A community left in shock. And a little boy left without his mother. Neighbors would later recall how quickly it all happened. One moment, quiet. The next, chaos. And then silence again, the kind of silence that lingers after tragedy, heavy and suffocating. Think about this. Wynter had spent her career helping people in crisis. She was the one others turned to when their lives felt like they were falling apart. And yet, in her own relationship, she couldn't see the full danger until it was too late. Not because she was blind. Not because she was weak. But because love, even toxic love, makes us believe. Believe in change. Believe in redemption. Believe that devotion, even when it turns suffocating, can be saved. And this is the most chilling truth of all. In abusive relationships, the moment of separation, the decision to walk away, to end it, to reclaim control, is often the most dangerous moment of all. That night, Wynter's decision to confront, to resist, to stand her ground, became the spark that lit Renardo's deadly rage. What began as a late-night argument ended as a murder-suicide. But for Wynter's family, her colleagues, and her community, it was just the beginning of grief, and the beginning of questions. How did no one see this coming? Were there signs? Could this tragedy have been prevented? By morning, the reality had set in. News of the shooting spread quickly, first through neighbors, then through co-workers, and finally across the community. A headline that felt impossible to believe: mental health officer killed in murder-suicide. For many, it didn't feel real. How could Wynter, of all people, be gone? Her family was devastated. Wynter was their daughter, their sister, their heart. She was the one who lit up every room, who carried so much responsibility with grace, who never showed weakness even when the world was heavy. To lose her in such a violent, sudden way, at the hands of someone she once trusted, was unthinkable. Her mother, Leon, later said she never saw any signs of trouble in Wynter's relationship. She believed Renardo to be respectful, even kind. That's the heartbreaking truth of so many domestic violence cases, even those
any signs, no signals. It wasn't like she was coming around us with black eyes or anything like that. So there was none of that.
Colleagues at the South Carolina Department of Corrections were equally stunned. They had lost not just a co-worker, but someone who brought humanity into a job that can often feel cold and thankless. Wynter wasn't just another officer. She was a mentor, an advocate, someone who believed people could change. To them, she was proof that empathy belonged even in the toughest environments. Friends and followers on TikTok shared their grief too. For many, Wynter wasn't just a public figure. She felt like a friend, someone who let them into her life with joy, authenticity, and vulnerability. Her page, once full of laughter and love, became a digital memorial. Strangers left comments of heartbreak, disbelief, and prayers for her family. And then, there was her son. Just a child. Too young to fully understand why his mother wasn't coming home. For him, the loss was not a headline, not a news story, but the permanent absence of the most important person in his life. The person who had sacrificed, worked, and dreamed for his future. That's the hidden devastation of domestic violence. It doesn't just take one life. It ripples outward, to children, to parents, to siblings, to co-workers, to communities who will never be the same. But even in the depth of grief, Wynter's family and colleagues refused to let her story end there. They turned their pain into action. Tributes poured in, not just to remember Wynter, but to honor her. A scholarship fund was created in her name, to help young people pursuing careers in criminal justice and mental health. It was a way to carry her passion forward, to ensure her legacy lived on in the very field she had dedicated her life to. Think about that for a moment. Wynter spent her life lifting others up. Even in her absence, she is still doing the same, inspiring, supporting, guiding the next generation. That's the kind of person she was. That's the mark she left on the world. But as powerful as her legacy is, her death raised painful questions. How could someone so strong, so aware, so loved, end up trapped in a deadly relationship? How could the signs have gone unnoticed by her family, by all of us watching? And what lessons can we learn from this loss, so that it doesn't happen again? Wynter's story is heartbreaking. But it's also a wake-up call. Because her death didn't come out of nowhere. The warning signs were there, hidden in plain sight, scattered across conversations, posts, and everyday moments. The problem wasn't that the signs didn't exist. The problem was that none of us recognized them in time. Experts call it digital breadcrumbing, the truth of an abusive relationship leaking out in tiny ways online. Captions that sound like jokes, body language that looks tense beneath a smile, offhand comments with an edge. In Wynter's content, you can see it, references to jealousy, playful threats, humor that doesn't age well. Most of us scrolled past. But to those who know the patterns, it was a quiet alarm. Here are patterns professionals tell us to watch for. Love bombing, overwhelming attention, too much too soon. Isolation, nudging you away from friends, family, support. Control, constant check-ins, location demands, phone monitoring. Jokes that aren't funny, threats played for laughs, comments that unsettle you. Escalation, jealousy hardening into anger, possessiveness into obsession. These are not quirks. They're warning signs. And the most dangerous moment isn't the first red flag, it's when someone decides to leave. That's when control is threatened. That's when violence is most likely to spike. That's what happened to Wynter. Remember, Wynter wasn't naive. She was trained, respected, strong. Abuse doesn't prey on weakness, it exploits love. It twists devotion into a leash. It blurs the line until you can't tell care from control. So let me ask you, have you brushed off a red flag in your own life? Laughed at a comment that didn't feel right? Called jealousy cute? These moments matter. What begins as a whisper can end as a scream. If you're in danger, or if someone you love might be, please reach out. Call. Text. Tell a friend. Talk to an advocate. Silence is what abusers rely on. Breaking it can be the first step to safety. And if you believe stories like Wynter's can save lives, help us keep this conversation going. Subscribe to my channel City Crime Tales and turn on the bell notifications so that you don't miss new cases, warning sign breakdowns, survivor resources, and critical updates the moment they drop. The algorithm doesn't always show safety content. The bell makes sure you actually see it. Please share this video with someone you love, your group chat, your siblings, your community. You never know who is quietly living this right now. One share could be the nudge that helps them recognize a red flag, make a plan, or ask for help. Wynter didn't get the chance to live out all of her dreams. But her story can still change outcomes for others, if we pay attention, speak up, and keep learning together.